In this episode of Dentside Depot, we are going to compare all the difference between a half-ton four-wheel drive Ford truck from 73 to 79 compared to a 3/4 ton or a 1-ton truck. So stay tuned. Let's look at all the differences between these two different types of trucks. First of all, and probably most notable, is that the bed options were limited with the 3/4 ton and 1-ton trucks. And by the way, 3/4 ton and 1-ton are basically the same thing with these trucks, with minor spring differences potentially. With the half-ton trucks like this 79 F-150 freewheeler right here, you had the option of having a regular cab four-wheel drive truck with either a short bed or a long bed. You could get either, okay? Now that was regular cab only. With the 3/4 ton trucks, you could not get a short bed on the regular cab trucks. They only came in long bed, and that was also the case for the super cab trucks as well. So the regular cabs and the super cabs, 3/4 and 1-ton, only had the long bed option, no short bed. Whereas the F-150s, you could get the short bed, which made them pretty neat to see a regular cab truck with the short bed. Now, there is one exception to this rule with the 3/4 ton trucks only. The 3/4 ton trucks in the crew cab configuration all came with the short bed. So conversely, these trucks only came with a short bed. They never came with a long bed. The F-350s were all two-wheel drive for the crew cabs, and the F-250s in four-wheel drive only came in short, and that was it, which was pretty strange that they made those decisions. You would think that the crew cab truck would be the one that you would want the long bed the most, because the whole point of these trucks was you would be putting workers in the truck and then they'd be going off and doing logging or railroad work or whatever it may have been. But that wasn't the case. They only offered them a short bed for the four-wheel drive, which was kind of strange. Oddly enough, you could also get a super cab F-150 with the 4x4 option. That would definitely be something that'd be more on the rarer side to see, as that's just pretty not typical to see one of those particular trucks. Obviously this one's a F-350, but you could get the super cabs in 4x4 as well, which is pretty neat. The next major difference between the half-ton and the 3/4/1-ton trucks has to do with the actual frame. So we have a slight body difference, but then we have a major frame difference. So let's get under these two different types of trucks here and let's take a look. Okay, so here we have the half-ton frame, and you can see it has a cross member in the front that goes across, and it's kind of slanted down, and you can see that there. In addition, we also have mounts for coil springs in the front, and we will talk about that when we get to suspension. Okay, now obviously on a short bed 4x4 truck, the frame is going to be shorter, being 117. So that's going to be a shorter frame compared to anything that you could get on a 3/4 ton truck. So now let's look at the 3/4/half-ton trucks, and the frames were the same between the 3/4 ton and the half-ton trucks. There was no frame difference between the two. So in the front, we again have that cross member, but it is different than the half-ton cross member. It's pretty much goes flat all the way across, kind of like a high boy, and I'm talking 79s in this video. 78 and 79 and 77.5 is really what I'm focusing on here. And that would be your major difference in the frames, is how the front was assembled. Okay, and obviously there'd be more differences in the frames between the two, but that's the significant indicator is what the front cross member looked like. In the later trucks, the frame width would be the same, and the beds and the cabs would all be able to be bolted to either frame. The earlier high boys did have frame differences. I'm not going to go into those today, but that's your major differences between the frames on both trucks, which is significant. So you cannot really bolt in a 3/4 or 1-ton axle into the half-ton trucks without some significant modification. All right, and that brings us to the next key difference between the half-ton and the 3/4 ton trucks, and that is your axle selection. So in the half-ton trucks, all the four-wheel drive half-ton trucks, they all got the Dana 44 front axle. That was it. There was no option on the front axle. It was Dana 44. In the 3/4 and 1-ton trucks, you had two options. You could get the Dana 44, obviously, and you could also get the big boy, the Dana 60 Kingpin, which was the most desirable axle in 78 and 79. Only 2 years that was offered in Kingpin with the high pinion. The high boys would have also had a Dana 60, but it would be the low pinion, much less desirable compared to the later Dana 60s. So that is going to be a major difference. Now, when we look at these front axles, we can quickly see another difference that comes in, and that is the suspension. So on the half-ton four-wheel drive trucks, we have coil springs in the front, and a lot of people say they prefer the ride of the coil spring. That's fine, I understand that. Maybe they are better. I'm not really gonna say one way or the other. You can also see on the half-ton trucks, we could have dual shocks in the front. Comparatively to the 3/4 and 1-ton trucks, all of these trucks were leaf spring front ends. Every single one was a leaf spring front end. There was no option to get a coil spring front, and there was also no option to do dual front shocks. Every single one of these trucks had single front shocks. There was absolutely no difference between the two. Now let's talk about the rear axles. All of the half-ton 4x4 trucks all came with the Ford 9-inch rear axle with either a 3.0 or a 3.5 ratio. Those were your only options, specifically in 78 and 79. There was nothing else that you could get in these trucks besides the 9-inch when we're talking the 4x4 variants. Now, that differs greatly from what the 3/4 ton trucks were. The 3/4 ton trucks would all come in 4x4 with the Dana 60 rear axle, so that's a significant difference between the two. Some people would say they like the 9-inch better. Other people would say that they like the Dana 60 better. The last thing I'm going to point out in the axle differences between the two is that the half-ton trucks obviously had 5 lug nuts, and the HD trucks obviously had 8. So that would be a key difference. The wheels were not interchangeable. When you're talking about 3/4 and half-ton trucks, the rear springs in these in the 3/4 and half-ton trucks would obviously have a higher rating. Let's talk about the engine options between the half-ton and the 3/4/1-ton trucks. In the half-ton trucks, the only available engine for four-wheel drive was the 351M. That was it. You could not get anything else. You could not get a 302. You could not even get a 400, even though they would have bolted right in. And also, obviously, 460 was not available. In the 3/4 and 1-ton trucks, your standard engine was still the 351M, but you could additionally opt for the 400. Right here we have a 351. They're essentially the same thing. The bore and stroke is slightly different, but they suffer from the same problems and they essentially have the same amount of power. Obviously a 400 is more desirable, but that's the key difference in the engine selection. Now, like I talked about in last week's video, 460 was not available from the factory in the 4x4 trucks. This was a huge mistake by Ford to not do this. It's really not known why that decision was made, but no 460 in any of the four-wheel drive trucks from 73 to 79. Okay, now let's talk about gross vehicle weight rating. On the half-ton trucks, the highest gross vehicle weight rating that you could get would have been 6,500 pounds, and that was the max. For any cab size or configuration, you could not go above 6,500. Conversely, on the 3/4 and 1-ton trucks, Ford would give them a gross vehicle weight rating of up to 8,600 pounds. You could get the 8,600 pounds on the regular cab trucks with the Dana 60 front. All of the F350 Super Cab 4x4 trucks, they all had an 8,600 gross vehicle weight rating, except for the ones that were very early builds in 78. I have seen some of those trucks with an 8,400, and that's because Ford just simply didn't have the 8,600 available at that point in time. But the majority of your F350s are going to be a 8,600 gross vehicle weight rating. All the late builds are definitely an 8,600. One quick correction, the highest on the regular cab is actually 8,550, not 8,600, but most of them would have been 8,400. Crew cab trucks started at 7,700 and they would work all the way up to 8,400 for the gross vehicle weight rating. So you could get a 7,700, an 8,100, or an 8,400. In this case, I believe both of these trucks are the highest gross vehicle weight rating. Let's take a look. I forget which one it is here. All right, let's see. So to find your gross vehicle weight rating, you're just looking right here on the sticker. Yeah, I apologize. It's 8,100. I don't know if I've ever seen an 8,400 crew cab gross vehicle weight rating, but you could get them in the 8,400. And both of these trucks do have, I believe, nope, this one does not have auxiliary springs on it. That's right, only this one does. But yep, okay, so you can see on the other one here also 8,100. So you could get them 84. but most of them are going to be 7,700 for the lighter duty gross vehicle weight ratings, and the rest of them are going to be 8,100. Okay, now let's talk about trim packages and the difference between the two. All of the F-150, F-250, and F-350 four-wheel drive trucks, they were all available in every size trim or every level trim package. So custom, Ranger, Ranger XLT, and Ranger Lariat. It didn't matter if it was a half-ton, three-quarter, or a one-ton. You could get any trim package that you wanted. In addition, you could also add freewheeling to a three-quarter and one-ton truck. You'll rarely see that. Very rare to see the freewheeling graphics on one of those trucks. Freewheeling stripes on a three-quarter or one-ton truck, it was available. Now, the one exception to that particular rule is the crew cab trucks only came in two trims. Custom would be your bottom level trim, and then Ranger XLT would be your top level trim. No Ranger Plain without XLT, and no Ranger Lariat in the crew cab trucks. If you see one that has Lariat equipment inside of it, it's because someone has added it or customized it. It was never made from the factory. Okay, here's a little tidbit difference between the half-ton and the three-quarter ton trucks. On the half-ton trucks, in the front, you could get tow hooks just like the Broncos. They'd be two little hooks that were factory installed, and they were available on the half-ton trucks. You could not get the tow hooks on the three-quarter and one-ton trucks, and you can see the reason for that is because the leaf spring shackles would have prevented you from being able to bolt them in. So they were not available on the three-quarter and one-ton trucks, but you could absolutely get the factory tow hooks on the half-ton trucks, which I definitely think is pretty neat. Another thing I forgot to mention, and I really just thought of this, is because you could only get the short bed on the F-150s, and you could only get the flare side or the step side short bed with the F-150 trucks, you could not get that on the regular cab trucks unless it was the 8-foot bed. Now let's talk about trailer special and camper special, two of my favorite options that add badges to the truck and also add significant functionality to the trucks as well. With the F-150s, you could get them in trailer special, and that's 4x4 or 4x2 or whatever it may be. One of my F-150s, actually Pops's truck, was a trailer special from the factory, so that definitely was available on both of the trucks as a really nice upgraded option. What was not available on the F-150s was camper special. You could only get camper special on the F-250 and the F-350s only. You could not get them on the little F-150 4x4s in either short bed or long bed. I'm assuming the reason for that is they didn't want these trucks having a camper shell or a big sliding camper because they weren't rated for it. But regardless, you could not get that option on the half-ton trucks. Exterior and interior upgraded options would have been available on both trucks. You could get anything that you wanted on any of the trucks. It would have been available for everything else that we've previously discussed. That includes CB radio. This truck right here is a CB radio, and this F-350 right here is a factory CB radio. You get CB radio on the crew cabs, you get CB radio on a little F-100, you get CB radio on anything. So every exterior and interior option was available on both, and really the only exception to that rule would have been the tow hooks, which only came on these specific trucks right here. That was it. Those were the only ones that got it, which is a pretty cool and pretty neat little option. You can also see here we have a 3/4 ton truck with the clearance lights on the top. You could get those on the F-150s as well. This is a factory clearance light truck, which you would think would be more of a heavy duty option, but it could be both, which I definitely think is pretty cool. So now let's take a look at what the price difference would have been between, let's say, this F-150 right here in its base trim, and let's compare it to a base cost for a 3/4 ton F-250 and see what the difference is here. Okay, now let's look at the price difference between the F-150 4x4 and the F-250 regular cab trucks as far as the total price is concerned. So let's go with a 133 wheelbase for both. So the F-150 with 4x4 right here would have been $6,546 in 1979. You can see the super cab would actually add about $1,500 to the total price, so that was definitely expensive as an option. And now let's look at the F-250s here. 250 regular cab with 4x4 would have been $6,722, And then if you added Super Cab, it would have been $8,000. Crew Cab would have been $81,444. That being said, you could see the price difference actually between the two was really not that significant. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Dentside Depot, taking a look at the differences between these two. If you think I missed something, go ahead, feel free to put it down in the comments below. Remember to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next episode.